All right, let's sit. So you might settle into a comfortable position. You can start by taking a couple of deep breaths. This helps to relax the body and relax the mind. And when we meditate, we're always pointing at the present moment. And we tend to go off in thought into the future or the past. But when we meditate, we like to be in the present moment. One thing that can help us keep the mind in the present moment is to have an anchor. An anchor can be any number of things. It can be the body, sound. It can be mental phenomena. Anything that helps keep the mind in the present moment is useful. When you meditate, it's useful to pick one anchor and stick to that. Keep returning to that. If it feels good to you, you can use the breath as your anchor. And just rest a little bit of attention on the breath, wherever you feel it. In the nose, in the chest, or in the abdomen. Once you've found the breath, you don't really need to do anything with it. It arises on its own without your input. So the thing to do is just to watch. See what happens. You can imagine that you're some sort of scientist. You have your microscope, you're looking at the breath. in great detail. All of the little nooks and crannies, all of the different sensations. I just look and see what happens. And as you're looking and seeing what happens with the breath, it will very naturally, inevitably wander off. This isn't a problem. It's just what minds do. When that happens, you will just as inevitably eventually come back to the present moment. When that happens, the thing to do is not to get upset with yourself or frustrated. Those are natural reactions too. The thing to do is just greet the mind with kindness. How great. Woke up, came back. If you greet the mind with open arms and welcome it, you'll very, very naturally want to return more often. Just like a stray puppy just wandered into your home. If you treat it kindly, you may want to stay for a while. You might notice as you continue to watch the breath, it may have shifted. May have been a seemingly solid phenomena. You may have seen deeper into this, and that seemingly solid phenomena may have become something else. More pieces or different sensations. Shift from pressure to tingling. You may have started to notice temperature. Different patterns of movement. Sensations may have been neutral. You might now have a pleasant tinge to them. You may have noticed different changes, or no changes at all. Just continue looking and see what you find. If you are feeling some traction, some continuity of mind, try and dial up the resolution. See things a little more clearly if you can. See all those little details. There's no need to effort. You're already there. In these last few minutes, if you like, you can continue on meditating as we have been. Or if the mind feels stable, you can also simply let go of all effort. No need to even watch. Just let the mind be in the present moment. And let things arise and pass away, all on their own. Thank you all. We had a fruitful set. So I met a new Dhamma friend a couple of months ago, and she asked me the question that always seems to get asked when two Dhamma people meet each other, which is, how did you come to the Dhamma? It's such a great question. It's not only an opportunity to connect, to share this important part of me with everyone, but there's also a lot of good Dhamma that comes up when I share this story. So I thought I would share my answer to that question, both as a way of introducing myself to everyone, and also because we could talk about some of the Dhamma that comes up when you reflect on your path of practice. Some of you know this story. So my story starts where I think all of our stories start, with suffering. When I left home, I was not really in the best place. I had depression, I had social anxiety, I had regular anxiety. And when I left home, it kind of snowballed until I got to a place that really was not very good. And so I was looking for a way out. I remember trying all sorts of things. Tried therapy and medication. One of them was meditation. The first time I meditated, it might have only been 5 minutes, but I recall seeing just a little bit of peace, not even very much, just a little bit, but it was enough. It was, I knew I had this kind of repeatable thing I could do to find some peace. And so I stuck with it. And that's how I approached meditation for a number of years, I guess. It was just medicine for me. It was something that made me feel better. When I moved up here to DC, I remember Googling Washington, DC Buddhist, because I knew Buddhist meditators, and that was all I had going. But I found some teachers and I sat with them. There was one in particular that I liked. Her name is Jennifer Stanley, and she still teaches here, I believe. But I tried a bunch of other teachers, and I stuck with her, and I didn't really know why I stuck with her for a while. I had a kind of light bulb moment one day when she was sharing a story. She was talking about having to find some way to get the cockroaches in her house outside, instead of killing them. And, to me, when I heard that, I thought that was a joke, right? Surely nobody could be this kind to these not very hygienic beings. But it turns out it wasn't. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me that, I had some kind of sense of what it must feel like to be able to live when you're able to share kindness to presumably all beings in that way. That was quite motivating for me. I had sort of gotten the concentration piece down by then, but I didn't really have any access to metta or kindness. So that really kind of cemented my desire to figure out the Dhamma. It wasn't too long after that I found retreat practice, and that was kind of another game changer for me. I had been meditating for a few years, and had been making, slow and steady progress, but on retreat, you have this kind of dedicated period of practice. And I started having insights, and the analogy in my head is it's like an iceberg. When you're practicing every day, the iceberg is melting a little more and a little more. And insights are when part of the iceberg breaks off. So it's a kind of large change all at once. That kind of opened my eyes to the kind of scope of change that can come with practice. It's not limited to just like making you feel better in the moment. You can make real meaningful change in your life. And I started to see that at that point. I found some Dhamma friends along the way, and I found some more teachers. But as I started doing this retreat practice, and I had done that for a couple of years, there's still something kind of holding me back from fully committing to the Dhamma. And maybe a little before the pandemic, I found a group of people who really practice very deeply. And I got many things from them, but I really also got a kind of license to fully commit myself to the Dhamma. And after that, my practice changed quite a bit. I reorganized my life so I could do kind of intensive meditation periods. And I saw a lot of change from that. I saw a lot of suffering drop out of my life. And when the suffering started to go, my practice started to shift. Like I had been very focused on me and how my problems were growing, and if I was making progress in that dimension.
What do you mean by suffering dropped off?
Like the day-to-day experience of life started to have less suffering in it. So you can think about suffering in the big picture, but what I'm meaning here is my life was just easier. If you look at your life, there's a lot of little pieces of suffering, just little disappointments or little things that didn't go the way you wanted to, or the world was not quite the way you thought it was. And a lot of that just started to drop out. I was able to kind of see through the misconceptions behind those. And it really, it's really been a qualitative change in my life in the past couple of years because of that. And so as that's happened, my practice has shifted more towards kind of connecting with others and helping others in their practice. And that's what brings me here to teach. And I have a great wish for us all to be happy and for us all to find our way to the end of suffering. Let's see what I can do. No promises. So that was my story. At least like a story. Sometimes it comes out differently. Sharing that always leads to this rich vein of thought and emotion and Dhamma. I'd like to share some of the things that come up when I reflect on my journey. And you might bring your stories to mine too, and see if some of the things that I speak about resonate with you. I imagine this is, like a lot of these things are pretty universal. So the first thing that comes to mind is I find it quite motivating. I sometimes feel that the best advertisement for the Dhamma would be to get a copy of the person that I was before I found the Dhamma and put him up here next to me and kind of point to the two and say, this is what life is like when you don't follow the Dhamma, and this is what life is like when you do. And having lived both of those lives, I find that quite motivating. There's a public service announcement that played when I was younger. It's like an anti-drug announcement, and there's this like kind of stern father figure in the kitchen, and he's got an egg holding up. And he says, "This is your brain." And he like cracks the egg in the pan and starts frying, and he says, "This is your brain on drugs." Any questions? Like, because it's like quite obvious which one you would want to be, and I make the same kind of comparison when I look at my past self. It's quite obvious to me which one I would want to be. And so I find that like motivating in the sense that there's more change too. I'm certainly not at the end. So there's perhaps a third person over here, the future Stephen can be something even better. We walk through life being blown around by the 8 worldly winds. There's praise and blame, gain and loss, and success and failure, and joy and sorrow. Sometimes they blow very softly and we're kind of at peace, and sometimes they blow very strongly. And when they're blowing very strongly, our focus tends to narrow down, and it's hard to see the bigger picture. So we might not kind of be easily aware of the progress we've made. There's a poem I like, kind of gets to this that I'll read. So this is autobiography in 5 chapters by Portia Nelson. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I don't see it. I fall in. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it's there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. And I get out immediately. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Then chapter 5, I walk down another street. Which I enjoy that. Because that's what practice is like, isn't it? Well, I will say, Portia Nelson is clearly a better Buddhist than I am, right? Like, I can walk down the same street 100 times and still fall in. But practice is like that, and it's easy to miss the fact that we do make progress. And I find that like bringing my story to mind is a great kind of antidote to that. And another thing that comes to mind when I share my story is gratitude. There's all kinds of gratitude that comes up. That well never seems to run dry. First, there's gratitude for the Dhamma itself. There's a story about the Buddha that I think about sometimes that comes to mind. This is SN 6.1, the Appeal of Brahma. I won't read this thing, but I guess I'll just paraphrase. So this is after the Buddha awakened. He sits down and he thinks, this Dhamma that I've discovered, it can be quite complicated, and people are very stuck in their ways and stuck in their lives, and they're very, very enamored of their things that they're craving. So maybe I shouldn't teach the Dhamma. Maybe it's not worth it. And then, so the story goes, Brahma comes down from the Brahma realm, and he entreats the Buddha to teach the Dhamma. And he says, "Sir, let the Blessed One teach the Dhamma. Let the Holy One teach the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes. They're in decline because they haven't heard the teaching. There will be those who understand the teaching." And so in the story, the Buddha, of course, agrees to teach the Dhamma, and yes, we all live happily ever after. But I think about that sometimes. It could, like, whatever you think about the story about the Brahma, it could have happened such that we don't have the Dhamma, right? There's no reason it had to be that way. We could just be stuck trying to figure this thing out on our own. Or we're not. I'm quite grateful for that. So there's also gratitude for the people that I've met along my path, teachers, friends, people who run retreat centers, the Sangha in general. Just as I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be practicing without the Buddha having shared the Dhamma, I wouldn't be here without all the other people either. If there was no one to teach, no one to write books, no one to kind of walk along with me, I would not be here. I'm quite grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the suffering that I encountered too, which may sound counterintuitive. And it definitely took me many years to get there. I was quite critical of myself for a while for having gotten myself into the place I was in. But I'm glad for it now, because it seems that there's a kind of Goldilocks zone of suffering that you need to be in to practice the Dhamma. Right? If you don't have enough suffering, your life might be very nice, but there's no reason for you to practice, right? And so you'll just have this life that's nice, but you won't have the full flowering of human potential that the Dhamma promises. And if you have too much suffering, you won't practice either. You don't have kind of room to step back, and you're too mired in suffering. You can't really make any changes. So as painful as part of my life was, I'm glad for it now. The last thing I wanted to bring up is interconnectedness. When I shared my story with you, you may have noticed that there was some similarity to your story. We've all suffered. We've all wanted to find a way out. We've all found teachers and friends to help us along the way, and each one of us has made progress too. I've asked others the question about how they came to the Dhamma before, and I inevitably find that we have the same story. There's always some minor differences, but at the heart of it, it's the same thing. There's a concept in the suttas, or in the Dhamma, called transcendental dependent origination. It's a mouthful, but it's, I guess the way I would describe it is, it's a, I guess, kind of description of the path of practice, but it's a description of the mental states that one goes through on the path to enlightenment. And this is from the Upanasa Sutta, which is SN 12.23. I won't quote the whole thing, but so this is a series of mental states, like one conditions the next, and it leads to awakening. So it starts, suffering is a condition for faith. Or confidence might be another word. So you start from the place of suffering, and you have confidence or faith that there's a way out. That might be the Dhamma, or that might be something else. And then from that place of faith and confidence, that conditions joy. You're happy that there's a way out of suffering. Joy can condition rapture or piti, which is this very pleasant physical feeling. That can condition tranquility, which leads to bliss, which leads to samadhi or concentration. And samadhi is a condition for seeing the world clearly. Seeing the world clearly is a condition for disillusionment. You see the falseness of the story that's constructed. And when you see the falseness of the story that's constructed, that's a condition for dispassion, for not being pulled around by the story. And dispassion is a condition for liberation. And so that's the story that we're all on. The details are different, of course, but we're all on that path from suffering to liberation. And so my story is your story, is everyone's story. And holding that understanding brings everyone closer to me. It lets me empathize and connect with everyone. It's not just Dhamma folks, too. Other religions, the purpose of religion is this same story. It's the path to liberation. And of course, many religions have a lot of stuff around that's not directed to liberation. But that's the point of the main religions, or the major religions. And so I can empathize with other spiritual seekers, too. And it's even everyone. Everyone is on this path. Everyone suffers, even if they haven't found the way out, or even know that there's a way out. So everyone is walking the same story, walking the same path. So in that sense, it's kind of a group effort, right? So the story I shared was from my perspective, but the points along my story involved other people. They involved teachers and friends and Sangha members. So I guess the analogy that I use in my mind is that, when I first started practicing, it felt like I was walking this path alone. Maybe there were other people on the path, but they weren't they didn't have any kind of bearing on my own journey. So I don't really see it that way now. I see everybody is on this path, and we're perhaps tied together with bungee cords, and there are people ahead of me who are kind of pulling me along with their practice, and my practice is kind of pulling others along too. And that's what brings me here to teach. This thing that we all are, it's moving in the same direction, and it goes a little easier, a little faster when we all work together. Maybe I'll be fully awakened.